Hello there, welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello.
This week, Trump may be talking peace with Russia, but he's going to war with judges and the American Constitution.
And he's pulled the plug on the voice of America. But first...
This week, President Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act, an 18th century law giving the president sweeping powers to arrest and deport foreign nationals in times of war. Trump declared members of a Venezuelan gang known as Tren de Aragua, or TDA, are conducting irregular warfare and undertaking hostile actions against the United States. He also claimed that the gang was closely aligned with and indeed has infiltrated Venezuela's government, headed by Nicolas Maduro. A US District Court judge issued an order temporarily blocking the deportations, only to be told that 2 plane loads of Venezuelans were already in the air. The judge ordered them to turn around, but they did not. The White House denied they'd refused to comply with the judge's order, claiming it had no lawful basis. Trump then made a big show out of deporting alleged gang members to El Salvador, posting a cop-style video on his social media site Truth, declaring, "These are the monsters sent into our country by crooked Joe Biden and the radical left Democrats." Those alleged gang members have now been sent to a mega prison where visitation, recreation and education are not allowed. This facility can hold up to 40,000 inmates. Each cell can fit between 65 and 70 prisoners. So, are these men monsters? Lawyers for one of them say their client is an LGBTQ Venezuelan who came to the US seeking asylum through proper channels. They say he's not a gang member. Immigration officers apparently misidentified his tattoos. We don't know how many cases like that there might be because all of the deportees were denied due process. Trump didn't need to provide any evidence that they were linked to gangs, just as he doesn't need to prove that Syrian-born Columbia University graduate and permanent US resident Mahmoud Khalil is linked to Hamas. He's locked up awaiting deportation. They didn't have to prove that Lebanese kidney transplant specialist Dr. Rasha Alwai is a supporter of Hezbollah. She too has been sent packing chairs.
Yeah, look, there's a few issues here. Firstly, the Alien Enemies Act only applies when there's an officially declared war, which there obviously isn't at the moment. And that actual non-metaphorical war has got to be between the US and another foreign nation or government, or it could be because of an invasion by a foreign nation or government. And that's why Trump's pretending that Tren de Aragua is Venezuela. It's for legal reasons. But America is not in a declared war with a foreign nation, and illegal immigration or cross-border drug smuggling does not qualify as an invasion by a hostile nation or government. Now, Trump's arguing in court that it doesn't matter what I think or what anyone else thinks for that matter, because whether there is officially an invasion is a non-justiciable political question. In other words, it's not the court's job to decide if it's an invasion, it's Trump's job. Now, I'm not sure that the Supreme Court's going to agree with him there, but even if that was true, the text of the Alien Enemies Act explicitly suggests that the courts can weigh in on whether the potential deportee is actually an enemy alien. You can't just deport random people without a trial. You have to prove that they're terrorists or invaders or whatever. Secondly, sending the deportees to El Salvador. You know, when El Salvador first offered to take prisoners from America, Trump himself said, "If we had the legal right to do it, I would do it in a heartbeat." In other words, even Trump thought it was illegal at first, but he's gone and done it anyway. Interesting. Thirdly, Trump not turning that plane around when the courts asked him to. Now, the administration says it's very important that people realise they are not actively defying court orders, but at the time the court order came, the flights were already over international waters. That's why the ruling didn't apply. I don't know if that's a legit reason, but I do know that doesn't explain how in that other case that John mentioned before, the Lebanese doctor case, she was issued with an H-1B visa before she flew in, yet she was still detained by customs officers and held at the airport for 36 hours. And then, even though her lawyer explicitly notified customs officials that she had a valid visa and a court order barring the doctor's deportation, and they told them before her flight, despite that court order, she was still deported. So look, John, maybe this is just a series of unfortunate coincidences, damn. But I'm starting to get a little bit concerned about the administration's attitude towards the courts.
Rightly so, because after all of that, Trump then launched an extraordinary attack on the judge who tried to stop the planes and imposed a 2-week pause on future deportations. This is Judge James Boasberg, calling him a
radical left lunatic of a judge
and
crooked.
And who
should be impeached.
Well, that earned Trump an unusual rebuke from none other than the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts, who issued a statement declaring, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. Roberts added, the normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. Basically, if you don't agree with a judge, you don't sack that judge, you appeal it to another judge. So this was significant pushback from the chief of the judicial branch, which has helped Trump to expand his executive powers thus far and now finds itself having to draw some new lines to try and limit him.
Okay, so we've got some legal issues here, John. And
we do.
Sadly, I've got one more for you. Possibly this is the biggest problem of all. 2 weeks ago, Trump signed an executive order which stripped the security clearances of the lawyers who provided special counsel Jack Smith with pro bono legal representation. The order also cancelled any legal work that their law firm might have obtained from the government. Now, look, that's all pretty childish vengeance from Trump, but it's within his rights to do that kind of thing. As the president, he can do that. Except then, last week, he signed a second executive order, and this one was targeting a second law firm, Perkins Coie. Now, that's the law firm that hired the company that created the Steele dossier. Trump's executive order for them didn't just withdraw their security clearances, but it required all government contractors who did business with Perkins Coie to have to disclose that to the government. So they're essentially saying, if you do business with Perkins Coie, you're not going to do business with the government. And it went even further, because this order also limits Perkins Coie's lawyers from entering federal buildings, like, say, for instance, courtrooms, and it stopped them having access to any government officials or government work. Complete black bans we're talking here of Perkins Coie, even though the actual people who were involved in the Steele dossier left the firm years ago. So that does seem a tad unfair to the people who are there now. This was immediately challenged in court, of course, and the judge seemed to find it all quite outrageous as well. She said, the idea that the president can ban a business from even entering a federal building sends chills down my spine. So she placed an injunction on that executive order. And how did Trump react to that? He signed a third executive order attacking a third law firm only days after a federal judge suggested his second order might violate the Constitution. And this third order, once again, suspended the lawyers' security clearances and limited their entry to federal buildings and stopped them getting government jobs or contracts, just like the last judge had told them not to do. But this time, it was because a lawyer, Mark Pomerantz, had tried to build a criminal case against Trump for the New York City DA after he left the third law firm to join the New York City DA's office. So, I don't know if you're following all that, but Trump is now trying to punish the law firms where his enemies once worked before they tried to take Trump on. Before. Now, I think that sends an unmistakable message to all the law firms out there. You cross me, and I might destroy you and your friends. Now, the courts are standing up to Trump so fast, but that's not going to do much good if the best law firms don't represent Trump's opponents because they're scared they're going to get sicked by Trump. I feel like this should be a bigger story than it is, John, because this is not good.
It certainly is not, and you can see why judges are feeling chills. Meanwhile, the Voice of America. It began as a radio broadcast into Nazi Germany in early 1942, less than 2 months after the United States was dragged into the Second World War following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And it began with this pledge.
Daily at this time, we shall speak to you about America and the war. The news may be good or bad. We shall tell you the truth.
And then, during the Cold War with Soviet Russia, Voice of America broadcasts became a crucial source of information, some would say Western propaganda, behind the Iron Curtain.
Cruising the waters of the free world, the courier will relay the Voice of America to listeners in communist countries, despite frantic efforts by Russia to jam the broadcasts. So, through this radio ship, messages of peace and goodwill are to be relayed.
Last year, Voice of America claimed to reach 350 million people in 50 countries, but now it's been effectively shut down. 1,300 staff put on leave, and services like Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty silenced. VOA broadcasters who turned up to do their shows found themselves locked out of their Washington studios this week. Last Friday, President Trump issued yet another executive order, this one eliminating non-statutory functions and reducing statutory functions of what it called unnecessary government entities, including the United States Agency for Global Media, which runs VOA. But others maintain it is far from unnecessary. Czech Foreign Minister Jan Lipavsky, for one, writing on Twitter, "From Belarus to Iran, from Russia to Afghanistan, the services remain among the few free sources of information for those living in oppression. Silencing them would not just be a loss for them, but for all of us who believe in democracy." To argue that the Voice of America, which has above all else promoted democracy in the face of fascism, communism and authoritarianism, or to say it's a relic or somehow anti-American, is to say that America is no longer committed to democracy at a time when it's clearly under threat, Chaz.
Yeah, look, I don't see how it's anti-American, that's for sure. But I can see why Trump thinks that, seeing as he often interprets criticism of himself as anti-American. And this happened only a couple of days before Trump wielded the axe.
What about the president's plans to expel Palestinians out of Gaza? Are you discussing that with him and giving him your...
Nobody's expelling any Palestinians. I don't know. Who are you with?
I'm with Voice of America, sir.
Oh, no wonder. Okay, Voice of America.
That might have been another of those coincidences we were referring to before, or maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, speaking of possible coincidences, we had planned an interview with a sacked VOA correspondent, but he cancelled that interview on short notice today. Several others were simply unavailable. Perhaps another coincidence, or perhaps just a sign of the times.
Look, I got to say, I've noticed these kinds of coincidences happening quite frequently lately. People are less willing to talk than they used to, for what it's worth. But what I would have asked our guest is how relevant propaganda directly from America actually is in 2025. I personally, I'm more interested in the fate of what they call the Open Technology Fund. That funds methods by which internet users worldwide can combat censorship from oppressive regimes themselves. So we're talking tech like the encrypted messaging app Signal, the anonymous browser Tor, also an open source tool that helped more than 1 million Cubans work around a social media blackout back in 2021. The theory being, boosting local resistance voices is more effective than beaming in an American voice. Of course, the Open Technology Fund was also effectively eliminated by these latest cuts, even though it only costs $40 million a year. But I'll leave the final word for Russian TV, who as always were rather direct in their views about the demise of Voice of America.
Трамп объявил о закрытии внезапно Радио Свободы и Голоса Америки. Сейчас они закрыты. Ну, это крутое решение со стороны Трампа.
Просто здесь что забавно, что как только прекратилось финансирование из американского Госдепа, закрылись все независимые СМИ.
Да, это прекрасно.
Wonderful. You draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, I think we can assume that Russia Today is still going to be funded by the Kremlin. And VOA would argue, of course, that they're not propaganda. they had the opportunity to tell us that themselves. Meanwhile, Chaz, Vice President JD Vance received a very hostile reception at the usually genteel Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. this week. When he arrived for a performance by the National Symphony Orchestra, this is what he was greeted with. Well, the reason for the minute or so of boos, jeers, whistles and heckles seems a little mixed. President Trump did recently make himself chairman of the Kennedy Center. He appointed loyalists, including his former ambassador to Germany, Rick Grinnell, to the board. That led to several resignations from the Kennedy Center, including the orchestra's artistic director, Ben Folds, who quit, and producers of the hit musical Hamilton then cancelled a planned run in protest at Trump's takeover of the centre. Some of the audience members this week were reportedly miffed as well that JD Vance, just by attending, meant that the Secret Service had to screen each entrant, going through bag searches and the magnetometer metal detector. That led to a late start to proceedings. That left some reportedly fuming, but at least one music lover appears to have been very much protesting against Donald Trump's meddling in the Kennedy Center, much to the amusing annoyance of the woman sitting next to him.
Yep, there he is. Boo!
Hush.
Boo!
If you can't act like an adult, go somewhere else.
Yeah, he just ruined, they ruined this place. Boo! 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 Why don't you go someplace else? Boo! 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 Yeah, January 6th.
Look, they might be concerned about how it's being run, or they might just be a bunch of Democrats. The same as it's no mystery why Trump draws massive cheers every time he goes to the football or the wrestling.
Well, President Trump went into the belly of the beast this week. He attended his first Kennedy Center board meeting and he had a lot to say about trying to spruce up the place, not enough gold, and what kind of performances he'd also like to see.
Yeah, I'd say come here and see a show. I was never a big fan of, I never liked Hamilton very much, and I never liked it. And we're going to get some very good shows. The thing that does well are Broadway hits.
Big Broadway hits like, I don't know, Hamilton, which has made over $1 billion at the box office in the last 10 years. Hard to imagine what Trump doesn't like about Hamilton. I'm racking my brains. I mean, just look at them. Maybe he just doesn't like powdered wigs.
Maybe that's it. Maybe he doesn't like that Hamilton creator Lin-Manuel Miranda keeps on criticising him. Or maybe it's because Trump's cultural reference points end in about 1988. It's time for more performances of Cats, John.
Yeah, that's what we all need. A push to ban junk food from the government subsidy that helps low-income families in America pay for their groceries is not new. It has been a source of heated debate for years, in fact, but now it is getting a boost from the newly minted Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. Well, for more on that, in the briefing room, here's Melina Wicks.
The Trump administration wants Americans to get healthy, whether they like it or not.
Trump administration expressing interest in banning SNAP benefits from being used to buy junk food.
This coming from a guy who installed a Diet Coke button in the Oval Office.
Can you confirm that you have added back the Diet Coke button?
I think this, first of all, I just got here.
That's a yes. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, provides low-income Americans with a monthly payment to put towards groceries. And health advocates, alongside RFK Jr. and a number of state governments, say allowing these payments to be used on soft drink and lollies amounts to a multi-billion-dollar subsidy for the junk food industry. And they have a point. A study by the US Department of Agriculture found that the #1 purchasers for SNAP households are soft drinks. From a health perspective, that's not great. But the report also found soft drink was the second top purchase for non-SNAP households. And overall, the shopping carts of SNAP and non-SNAP households were basically the same. In other words, Americans on benefits consume too many sugary drinks because Americans in general consume too many sugary drinks. Even the people being moralistic about it can't remember that fruits and vegetables exist.
Food stamps should be used for things like milk, eggs, maybe some protein, something that we actually need.
So is it fair to police what people are eating, just because they're receiving money from the government. Also, is it practical? To ban junk food, you have to define it, which is not as easy as you'd think. The definition in a Missouri proposal would prevent the purchase of Powerade with SNAP funds, but allow sugary bottled coffee drinks. And several states characterize candy as any unrefrigerated, flourless preparation of sugar, honey, or other natural or artificial sweeteners in combination with chocolate, fruits, nuts, or other ingredients or flavorings in the form of bars, drops, or pieces. That makes sense, I guess. Except it would mean Kit Kat and Twix bars, which contain flour, wouldn't be banned. Welcome to the food pyramid, guys. And even if you did successfully ban the use of SNAP benefits for junk food, these payments are a top-up. People who receive them still spend their own money on food too, which isn't subject to any restrictions. If you ask Americans why they eat unhealthy food, they'll tell you. It's because they like the taste. That's true regardless of whether you're rich or poor, or on government benefits or not. This debate isn't about whether the American diet could be healthier. It definitely could. It's about whether the government should be trying to improve nutrition with carrots or sticks. Although good luck getting anyone to eat a carrot.
As if there isn't enough chaos and confusion in Washington, D.C. at the moment, last week a shutdown of the federal government looked all but certain.
A shutdown could force essential government employees to work without pay and then furlough others. It would also disrupt airport security, border crossings, national parks, and more.
House Republicans put together a continuing resolution, or CR bill, to keep the government funded and open, but it was entirely on their terms. Billions in cuts to domestic programs with more money for defence and border control. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson was able to pass the bill in the House, and then he sent his members home. But he still faced an uphill battle getting that CR through the Senate, and he began shifting the blame.
It looks like they're going to try to shut down the government. It's a striking new posture for Democrats who have always said they've just been apoplectic about the prospect of government shutdowns.
It did look like Democrats were going to block it in the Senate, but then with hours to go, the Democrat Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer blinked.
While the CR bill is very bad, the potential for a shutdown has consequences for America that are much, much worse.
It seems Schumer was convinced that a shutdown would play into the hands of a president and his so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, who would happily never reopen many government agencies.
Allowing Donald Trump to take even much more power via a government shutdown is a far worse option. A shutdown would allow DOGE to shift into overdrive.
And so the shutdown was avoided, but the split between the House and Senate Democrats was pretty stark, a sign of strategic dysfunction and disunity of purpose since Trump's return to office. And Democrat House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries repeatedly refused to answer questions about Chuck Schumer's vote and even whether the 74-year-old was still fit to lead the party.
Have you lost confidence in him, the fact that you guys see this so differently?
Next question. Thanks.
No comment is not a vote of support. And some House members, like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, were even less diplomatic, expressing their outrage at Schumer's capitulation.
I think there is a deep sense of outrage and betrayal. And this is not just about progressive Democrats. This is across the board, the entire party.
And there were headlines like this in Politico. Terrible for their relationship, the Schumer-Jeffries split explodes in public. And this, in the Bulwark, Chuck Schumer is facing a Biden moment. The problem wasn't just the sellout, it was the sense that he lacked vigour. Well, vigour or not, Chuck Schumer certainly lacks power. And so do all Democrats in Washington, D.C. They lost the White House last year, they failed to win back the House, and a Senate majority could be a long, long way off. And for now, they appear leaderless and rudderless. Power in Washington is firmly in the hands of Trump and the Republican Party chairs.
Honestly, I don't think Schumer had a lot of options. After House Republicans passed the continuing resolution, if the Senate Democrats then filibustered it, they would almost certainly have been blamed for the shutdown. And that's fine if they're going to win some concessions from the shutdown, but they wouldn't have. Trump would have given them nothing because the shutdown would have worked out great for him. In the case of a shutdown, the Office of Management and Budget controls how the government runs. And the head of OMB, Russell Vought, he's the Project 2025 guy. He loves sacking federal workers. He would have just gone nuts. You're sacked, you're sacked, you're sacked. Also, Elon Musk was apparently, behind the scenes, explicitly asking for a shutdown because he thought it would make it easier for him to sack hundreds of thousands of federal workers, essentially creating a permanent shutdown for many departments. Chuck Schumer also noted that Trump would have liked nothing more than to defund or freeze all the court cases that his administration are currently losing.
A shutdown could stall federal court cases, one of the best redoubts against Trump's lawlessness. It could require to furlough critical staff at the courts, denying victims and defendants alike their day in court, dragging out appeals, and clogging the justice system for months or even years.
So this really was a lose-lose situation for the Democrats. So given that, why are they blaming Schumer for? Well, there is a reason. It's because he played his cards terribly. All that we've just told you, John and I, Schumer knew that weeks ago. Nothing's changed. Yet he let virtually every swing district Democrat in the House walk the plank to vote against the continuing resolution anyway. Without warning them, he was going to pull the rug out from under them. Literally, the day before he declared he would vote to allow the continuing resolution to happen, he declared, "Our caucus is united," and he would give Congress time to negotiate bipartisan legislation that can pass, i.e., he would not support the continuing resolution. So the day before he announced his final decision, he was saying the opposite. It makes the Democrats look like amateur hour, and they are filthy about it. Some Democrats have apparently begun encouraging AOC to run against Schumer in the 2028 New York Senate primary, although the guy's going to be 78 by then, so he's probably going to retire. Republicans, though, they're not helping at all. They're rubbing it in as much as they possibly can, of course. Some Republicans are saying they'll execute the same strategy again of ignoring the Democrats, passing a funding bill through the House, and then just waiting for the Senate Democrats to cave. And Trump, he's played the most dastardly trick of all. He's being pleasant and grateful.
I appreciate Senator Schumer, and I think he did the right thing. Really, I'm very impressed by that.
How dare you be nice, Trump? So sneaky.
Yeah, I think Chuck might be toast if that continues. That's all for tonight's edition of Planet America. We're taking a 2-week program break while the ABC broadcasts highlights from the Melbourne Comedy Festival. But we will return on Wednesday, April 9th.
But before we take in some comedy, we're going to have a weekend edition of Planet America this Friday on ABC News at 8 p.m. Eastern. Both shows are available on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook. See you there.
Bye-bye.